Excellent. Well, hello. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to the Glenn M. Broom Center for Professional Development and Public Relations 3P webinar. Today's webinar is about something that is so near and dear to our hearts here at the Broom Center. Today is all about you. It's how others in the industry can help you along in this journey of your career and how to put those people who are willing to champion for you in the position to help. So I'm Dr. Kay Sweetser, and I'm the director of the Broom Center. You should see an ASL interpreter on the screen. And so if you would like to use this feature of the webinar today, then please either pin or spotlight his video. Before we jump into things, I'd like to take an opportunity to honor the land upon which San Diego State University is built. And so we have Brittany Lamb joining us, and she is a class of 2021 Broom Student Fellow, and she's going to help us honor the Kumeyaay people.
For millennia, the Kumeyaay people have been a part of this land. The land has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. As members of the San Diego State community, we acknowledge this legacy. We promote this balance and harmony. We find inspiration from this land, the land of Kumeyaay. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Brittany. And although we are not physically present on SDSU's campus today, it does remain necessary for us to show honor and respect toward the Kumeyaay people and their land. So I very much appreciate that. Let me walk you through a little bit about what we're going to do today at this webinar. So we're going to encourage you to take your outtakes from today and bring them over to social media. Please use our hashtag, which is 3P Career Tour, or tag us at Broom Center to join the conversation. Our panel is going to start as a moderated panel, and then we're going to open it up to QA so that we can cover as many topics as possible. We're not going to spend a long time introducing each of our Megawatt mentors, but I encourage you to download the speaker program. You're going to find in the speaker program a lot of information about their careers, their social handles, and a way to connect with our awesome mentors on LinkedIn. And so I just put into the chat a link to a tweet where you can find the download for that. Dr. Broom is the namesake of the center here at San Diego State University. And he was all in when it came to mentoring. And the first thing that you should know is that he's considered the professor of the profession because he literally wrote the textbook on public relations. Nearly every PR practitioner has this textbook, Effective Public Relations, on his or her desk today. He had more than 3,000 students who sat before him over his 30 years at San Diego State University. And there was one man in particular who felt that Dr. Broom was such an important mentor in his own career, and that's Scott Pansky, who's here with us today. Now, Scott left our awesome campus on the Mesa in sunny San Diego and eventually co-founded a global PR agency called Allison+Partners. He is really just done gangbusters for himself, an amazing career, and not only digging into giving back with his PR skills, but also having such a successful and a great culture within his PR agency. So it looks like Scott really had the right mentors who were holding him up and getting him through those right doors early on in his career. Now, as I mentioned, Scott himself was mentored by Dr. Broom, and I know that that surely makes Dr. Broom proud every day when he looks down to see how Scott pays it forward with this new upcoming generation, you, and how much Scott invests in helping you find your way into your careers. And so without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Scott.
Thanks, Dr. Sweetser, and it's my honor and pleasure to be here, and thank you for helping to manage this program and bring it to life. And Brittany, thank you for your words, and over the last few weeks, I've enjoyed mentoring you as well, and I think that to me was Glenn's legacy, was mentoring students and helping them get their careers. I still remember getting a phone call from him saying, Scott, there's an agency here in San Diego that's hiring. It's called the Gable Group. And I said, yeah, I saw that in the newspaper, that it was for a biotech job. And I didn't have that skill set. And he said, no, this is for a consumer PR job. And, one of my alumni reached out and asked us to see if we knew of any students. And I thought of you first. And I went in and I interviewed with a brand new account supervisor, a guy named Scott Allison. And our agency, as you know, is Allison+Partners. So Scott and I have been together for nearly 30 years, from me graduating from San Diego State, and Scott too is a graduate of San Diego State. So I started working with Scott back in the early 90s. And I remember I had the opportunity to work on a great program to support a nonprofit called Angel Flight. And it was a small group of pilots that would fly patients all over the country to get support and medical services that they couldn't afford on their own. And we reached out to everybody and were not successful. And we ended up getting a public service announcement with the cast of Wings, a TV show on NBC at the time. And then Scott had a brilliant idea, we should do something like a bowling tournament. Let's challenge Southwest Airlines to see if we can do something. And Scott sent a fax to their CEO, Herb Kelleher, and Herb responded back in 15 minutes saying this was his favorite television show. And the next thing you know, we were putting together a national program across the country. One of our first guest speakers here is Linda Rutherford, who I knew when she first started at Southwest Airlines, and she was assigned to work with our little firm out in San Diego, and we all came together to do a program. So Linda, it's an honor to have you here with us today. Thank you for joining us. And I'll just throw the first question out to you, and then we'll engage with the rest of our panelists, and I'll say something short about them as we all move forward. Linda, I know Southwest could not have been your very first job. What was your first job that you ever got in the PR space?
Well, interestingly, I have a journalism background. So my first job was actually for Newsweek magazine up in New York, reporting in the bureau covering back of the book, entertainment, legal type stories. And then when I moved from New York back to Texas, I continued doing some reporting. And then my first job in PR was actually for Collin County Community College back in the day as a public information writer. So it was basically trying to find ways to highlight programs, the college's programs, interesting research that the faculty was doing, things like that. So that was sort of my first foray to even understand what public relations was.
Dang. So how did you go from the college world into the hospitality and airline industry? That's a big jump.
Yeah, thankfully, from journalism, I was actually covering airlines. And so when I left that role and went into public relations, it was for a period of about 6 months. And then one of my former sources, Southwest Airlines, called and said, hey, we have a public relations coordinator role open, entry level. We love the way you write. We enjoyed working with you as a reporter. Would you be interested in coming to learn more? And I thought, what in the world could I do in public relations for an airline? But I went to visit them in March and started June 1st, 1992, and the rest is history.
Dang. And you've been at Southwest for a long time and just doing amazing things. Thank you for joining us today. Hey, Javier, why don't you share how you got your first job?
Sure. Well, my very, very first job was Jack in the Box. I was, dealing with customers and make sure they were happy. But in terms of public relations, I started my work at the National Latino Civil Rights Organization named MALDEF. And so there I was responsible for corporate development, which essentially means that I was selling the whole idea of civil rights to various funders. And so that opportunity kind of gave me the first foray in terms of how to pitch an idea and how to get that idea funded. And so from there, I went on to another national organization. Eventually, I ended up in the political sphere. I was working in campaigns, political campaigns, and that's probably one of the most difficult PR jobs I've ever had. Trying to sell not only a candidate, but the ideas that the candidate has, and developing the campaign over that so people can select your candidate. to be victorious. And then now I've been with Walmart for about 10 years, and my role is to develop strategies that engages our customers and our associates in the local communities. And so we do a lot of work with philanthropy, communications. We work with all aspects of our operations to ensure that we are putting our best foot forward as a company.
It's a big jump though from public affairs into big brand. What was that like, to kind of transition? Did you quote sell out to go to corporate? What did that transition look like?
I never thought I would end up in corporate. I graduated with the idea of like social justice and making sure that, communities, especially lower income communities, were taken care of. And when I was approached by one of my mentors about this opportunity to join Walmart, I just thought, why would I and why should I? But then I thought about it and I saw the job description. And in the job description, it talked about the company's interest in developing stores in lower income communities and in food deserts. And for me, I really saw a connection with my passion, a connection with, making sure that there's economic investment in communities. And I took the leap. It was a big fork in the road because my other idea was potentially to run for office. And I knew that joining a company like Walmart would make it very difficult, especially in California, to run for office. But I took the leap, and I've been very excited, very happy with all that I've done and all that I've accomplished.
Awesome. Thank you, Javier. Appreciate it. Ashley, uh, we've known each other for a few years, and you've had a few jobs during that time frame, plus your own consulting practice. But where did you start your career? How did you get going?
I've had quite a crazy career, actually, not kind of typical. I went to a small liberal arts college, which was called Bates College up in Maine. And so when I graduated and came back to New York, because I grew up in the New York City area, it was really difficult, especially when I graduated in 1991. So Linda, you and I are close on graduating together. I had a really difficult time. I knew I wanted to get into marketing. But coming from a liberal arts degree, a Bachelor of Arts, I went to school studying like everything from psychology to political science. It was not easy to compete with students from Columbia University or NYU or who already had their networks in New York City. Even though I was from the New York City area, I didn't go to college here. And so I didn't have that kind of network. So luckily I'd done a mentorship my junior year in college that I got through my college in Boston at a place called Lehman Brothers in Boston that I did for the summer. And then, so I figured, which was an investment banking firm, I thought since I had that internship, maybe it'd be easier for me to kind of come through the back door and maybe get into marketing that way. So I wound up getting a headhunter and got a job working for a company called Kidder Peabody that was a subsidiary of GE. And so my very, very first job, honestly, was as a stockbroker assistant. And luckily, I had a really, really great boss. After a couple of years as an assistant, she had, what was great about the Kidder Peabody is I was part of the GE network. And so they always have jobs internally first before they put it out to the market. And so my boss knew I originally had wanted to go into marketing and saw this brand new job open up at headquarters down Wall Street because I was working in the MetLife building, and it was a marketing coordinator job. And that's how I got my start. So after my first 2 years at Kidder, I got this promotion and started as a coordinator. And that's how I got into my career of marketing, and been in marketing, in some sort of marketing since then.
How did you transition from all that into technology? Because you and I have been in the technology world together, gosh, almost 20 years.
Yeah. Well, luckily that job at Kidder was working for I actually didn't go into marketing department. I actually went into working with the analysts, and the analysts covered software and technology. And my boss actually was the managing director, a gentleman named David Porras, who was like the hot person at our company at the time because he had been covering Dell Technologies and CompUSA and everything that had to do with technology. It was early on in the early 90s. So tech was becoming a big thing way before even the web was starting to, what we called the web back then, really going. So it was really about software peripherals. So I worked with a gentleman named Charles Phillips and David Corris, and there was a group. And because they were becoming the hottest analysts on the street, they wanted their own marketing coordinator, because the marketing team honestly wouldn't pay attention to them because tech wasn't big back then.
It wasn't sexy.
It wasn't sexy, especially for an investment banking firm like Kidder Peabody. So they created this job, and I wound up actually working on the periphery of marketing, working directly for David and working with these guys, and I was their coordinator, and I would do all the events and shows, and we would go on portfolio traveling around the country to these portfolio manager events so that they could actually do their spiel. And so that kind of gave me a background in understanding tech, surprisingly, through osmosis. And then what happened was a few years later, Kidder got bought by the House of Pain, Paine Webber. We used to call it the House of Pain at the time. And the group had gotten an offer to go to Morgan Stanley. And I think I realized I was really happy with what I was doing. I loved what I was traveling all over for a 20 something. To have an expense account was just insane. We stay at these great places. I was doing events, but I had this epiphany that I didn't want to continue on in Wall Street. I wanted to do something more creative and really go full out into marketing tech, what we call marketing tech, MarTech now. And the Princeton Review had just launched their new line of CD-ROMs inside the SAT, GMAT, GRE. They were known back then only for their classes for test prep, and they were becoming a software company. And I applied for their marketing manager job and became their first product marketing manager / channel marketing manager, because they didn't have an internal team. And that's really kind of what was my leap into tech. And so I was an education product marketing manager in software and have been in it since then.
It's interesting as a trend from all of you is that, you didn't walk right into the PR world. You didn't go right into that immediate job. You had a lot of different things that you were doing. Charlene, you've been at UPS for a long time. By no means had to be your first job. I know that.
No, good afternoon, everyone. My first job was working as a well application processor for the Chester County Health Department. So that was a job that my mother got me. And I realized that pushing papers and calling and finding out, where people's diagrams were, and did they have to get with the Army Corps of Engineers to have their land survey, was really something I didn't want to do on a long-term basis, but it was my first job.
Dang. And tell us a little bit more how you ended up at UPS.
Well, it is a story, but I'll make it very brief. I happened to work for one of the largest fast food companies, and there was a incident where my mother had asked me on a Sunday morning to go and talk to some prospective college students about how you could work and go to school and you could be successful, and she was having a brunch for them. So I told her that I needed to call off from work, but I would, after her numerous attempts at convincing me I needed to do this, I obliged and said yes. So when I attempted to call off, there was no answer. So I said, I told her, I said, Mom, no one's answering there. She says, oh, don't worry, we'll call, and you'll call off when you get to the Sheraton for brunch. Well, there was a murder and robbery at the establishment I worked at. And so I was not going to go back. So my mother then, after that event, the following Sunday, there was a UPS HR manager who was at our church, and he stood up and said that HR was hiring. And my mother, I think she literally leaped over the pews to track him down to tell him that my daughter needs to work for UPS. And that's how I became a UPSer. So it was, again, at the hands of my mother.
Well, it's interesting from a mentor standpoint that all of us have had different mentors in our journey to help us get to where we're going. But, a mentor can be a parent like Charlene's mom. It could be a first boss. It can be a school teacher or a coach. I guess what I'd love to hear from all of you is that you've had to take a lot of risks in your life to get to where you are, a risk to change, a risk to push beyond yourself. Could you share, each of you kind of quickly, in regards to who was your first mentor and what was the advice that they gave you that stuck with you as you've grown in your career? And I'm sure you've had many mentors, but I'm really curious about who those first mentors were, because a lot of the students that are here now are going to be getting their first mentors in this process. And I'd love for them to kind of hear that from you. Charlene, why don't we start with you this time?
So my first mentor was a track coach out of high school. His name was Dr. Hewlett. He had this philosophy of always following through and completing what you start. And he would always give us an incentive on our way back home from a track meet. If you come in last, you might need to find another ride. But what he meant by that is, he says, don't miss your moment. So he always wanted to make sure you can never win if you don't apply. You can definitely assure you'll lose if you don't even try. So he was definitely one for effort and definitely one for practice, as well as making sure that you get feedback along the way. So he would always give you feedback on technique. He'd always talk to you about teamwork and making sure the team was always celebrating wins and really encouraging everyone and making sure that, everyone's going to have a bad day. But it was really his job as a mentor to make sure that if we lost the meet or we won the meet, that we were equally supportive to each other and congratulatory of each other, and to make sure that as no matter what, we'll always be a team, no matter what the outcome.
Great counsel. Great counsel. Ashley, how about you?
I would have to say, and he may not even know that he's been my mentor this whole time, Charles Phillips, who I worked with at Kidder Peabody. Because I was the events coordinator, I came from really humble beginnings, being from Jamaica. To be quite honest, in the early 90s, there weren't a lot of minorities, and much less I was the only woman at the time as a coordinator. Pretty much the only other women were assistants. That was it. And Charles was my colleague. We both reported directly to David Corus. He was a software analyst at the time. And right from the beginning, he actually gave me for the holidays, $100. And for me, I was broke. Living in New York City is quite expensive, but he gave it to me. Not even my own boss had given me a holiday gift, as normal people get it on Wall Street, at least. And I mean, when I'm talking about broke, I'm talking about broke. I had 2 jobs. I worked at Kidder Peabody in the day, and then in the evenings, I bartended at night just so that I could pay my rent. And so to get $100 for Christmas, it was a big deal. So the thing I had learned from him, and we've known each other. Matter of fact, my first CMO job, where I was at Infor, was because of him. He was the CEO of Infor, and that was only a couple of years ago. I've known him my entire career. So even though I started with him as colleagues, and he probably doesn't even realize, but he taught me a lot of how to work within that industry and how to speak to people and how to be different and embrace being different, because we were the only people at the time. And so it was always a really important lesson of how you also treat other people. And just there's so much more I could talk about, but he has been my first and still is my mentor, even though I'm at now Oracle. If it wasn't for him, as a matter of fact, my first agency, when he went on to Morgan Stanley became my first client of my agency when I was doing digital marketing. So he's been a constant throughout my entire career without him even realizing it. And also being a friend and a great mentor. And even today, he's still a great mentor for me.
Ashley, one of the questions that came in here as we were talking is, how often is a mentor relationship relatively unknown in the moment? Is it sometimes, I assume a lot of mentors don't even know that they served as a mentor.
Yeah, well, he probably now knows about this. But yeah, I would say I met Charles when I was 23, and that's 30 years ago.
Wow.
So he's still a mentor to me and still taught me a lot. And
That's
I
awesome.
respect him more than, and his wife, they've both been so generous to me in just teaching me a lot.
That's awesome.
Non-work, so personal too.
It's incredible when you can have a relationship that's like that has that much impact. Javier, how about you?
I met my first mentor as a congressional fellow. I was at UC Santa Barbara, and then was trying to figure out what I was going to do after graduation. One of my professors said, you should apply for this Congressional Hispanic Caucus Fellowship, which I did. And so I was sent to Washington, D.C. I spent a year there working for the Department of Education. And as part of the program, we met with various industry leaders and elected officials. And in one of the dinners, I sat at the table at the State Farm table. And the State Farm representative was Pepe Estrada. And I sat next to him and we just started talking. And he asked me, well, what is it that you want to do? Where do you want to go? And what do you want to accomplish? And we just hit it off. I mean, I really appreciated his very calm demeanor. He was just warm, very welcoming. And at that table, we exchanged emails. And again, I was a fellow and he was a director with a major corporation. So, somehow I garnered the courage to ask him for an email and to, establish a communication. And, I saw him a couple of times during the fellowship program, and we stayed in contact. And one of the things that I learned from him is just the importance of having a balance in life. And he, taught me that in order for one to be fulfilled, you need to kind of just have a balance between your work, your community engagement, community involvement, and your social interactions. And that has been something that really has guided me throughout the years. I am very much into fitness, as you know, Scott. That has been a very important part of my life and my career. I don't think I would be able to be as as energized, as attentive, as everything that I do, if it were not for my physical fitness and also my community engagement. And it's not enough to just go clock in and clock out. You need to find other things to do outside of your work. And so
how many boards? How many boards are you on now, Javier?
It's about five. Five boards. I probably need to start removing one or two, but I'm on five boards. And but when you love something, and especially when you join a board of an organization you love, it makes it very easy.
Absolutely.
So,
I know. I agree. It's awesome.
Mhm.
Linda, your first mentor and lesson learned.
I think, somebody said it, that the people didn't necessarily know they were being mentors at the time. And I don't think you viewed it as such, but, looking back when I was 23 and started at Southwest Airlines, my then director was a woman by the name of Ginger Hartage. And I think I saw a lot of things in her. First was sort of how to maneuver the formal and informal power structures of an organization. Secondly, a great role model for women in leadership that was, inspiring to me to aspire to try and be a leader inside a big corporation. And she was always full of a ton of great advice. I think the piece that I remember most and took to heart was, you have to have a perspective. So people don't want to know what you know until they know you. But then you need to, be brave and have a perspective, and then the courage to share it. So I remember a particular time when I had the opportunity to go into the boardroom and listen to a presentation. And I remember kind of, constantly leaning over to Ginger and whispering some things to her that, I was thinking, or that what my input was. And she kept nodding politely. And at the end of the meeting, I said, wow, thank you so much for including me. I said, it was a great conversation. She said, well, you had a lot of really great things to say, a lot of great input. She said, too bad nobody heard it. And so it was like, huh. And so it was just a lesson to find the ways for my perspective to be shared. And that's been a big part, I think, of the future roles that I've had. And particularly for women, sometimes I think that as we move up in an organization, we can tend to mute ourselves because we don't want anyone to know they made a terrible mistake by the decisions they made to put us into leadership. And then also just the pressure we put upon ourselves to be informative and to be, knowledgeable about our business. And I think sometimes then we tend to just, close ourselves off when we shouldn't. But that was just a tremendous piece of advice from her.
And Ginger's amazing. So you could not have a better mentor. She's fantastic. Javier, I'll go back to you. I'm a student right now, and we're coming out of COVID. We've got a really bad recession going on. How do I find a mentor? What are some of the things I should be doing in finding a mentor?
Well, I think, these times have been very, very difficult for many, and especially during our social interactions, socializing and meeting people. But one of the things that these times have allowed for is just uh, being able to access different events and gatherings and organizations and Zoom calls like this one. And, oftentimes it might seem that, it's not as personable as if it were in person. But I think there's opportunities for one to like find individuals, find persons they can connect with during these Zoom calls, during these virtual conferences, during the virtual dinners, and reach out and chat with somebody. Introduce yourself and exchange information, exchange numbers,
Javier,
and
they're
be able
never
to
going to
leverage.
write back to me. I'm scared. I don't like being on Zoom all the time. And you're so big and important. Why would you pay attention to me and respond?
To be honest, I mean, you just have to, try and try. For every 10, 10, you know, uh, extensions that you make or 10 individuals that you reach out to, one may reach out back. And that for me is a success. Sometimes it's very difficult to get the attention of somebody just because there's so much going on, board memberships and work. But I can guarantee you that if you try and just be persistent, you will find that person that makes the right connection.
Any other advice, folks, you'd want to add in finding a mentor? Go
I
ahead,
would say
Ashley.
actually try in your colleges or your schools, or even your parents' friends. A lot of times, just having the conversation sometimes, and then being able to listen, because a lot of times something will lead to something else. I think I've had where people have reached out to me from my school just saying, hey, I went to Bates, or our sister school, which is Colby and Bowdoin. I've actually had students reach out because they saw Bates on my LinkedIn profile and just say, hey, I just had a couple of questions. Do you mind if I ask? And I respond actually pretty quickly when I can. If I, because a lot of times they don't know who else to ask for. So I figured if they reached out to me, if they felt that confident to do it, the least I can do is at least try and answer them.
And actually
Awesome.
brought up a good point in terms of, trying to find somebody that connects you with that person. So either, you were in the same fraternity or sorority, or if you had a common friend. I mean, I think that makes the connection a little bit stronger, because I do get LinkedIn messages, and sometimes, they're just from out of nowhere. But if somebody sends me a message and I said, hey, I attended the session, I heard you speak, I thought your What you said was completely right on. I would like to, stay in touch, or if you have a particular question, then ask it. I think that would make a stronger connection.
So remember, everybody listening in today, if you heard something from one of these speakers, it's okay to reach out to LinkedIn and ask questions. Linda, you were going to say something.
I was just going to agree. I think build your network and see who you have a connection with, because I do feel like the mentor relationship really is about chemistry too. And so finding that right person who can help be an advocate and a coach and provide a safe space to help have conversations that help you grow. But I like calling it the P&P network. So it's the parent and professor network. And don't be afraid of who your parents may know, because as Ashley said, it may lead to 6 degrees of separation of somebody that leads to, a panel that you heard about that you get to sit in, a book recommendation, somebody to go have coffee with. But just take the initiative and start building it. And no time is too soon to do that.
Awesome. Charlene, how about you? I know that you've had a lot of mentors in your life. What kind of advice would you give in not just necessarily finding a mentor, but optimizing your mentor too? Sometimes people reach out just once and you never hear from them again, but I know that you want to try and build relationships that can really help you long term.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. I think that there's a great opportunity to leverage your mentorship opportunities while in school. And I think that, a lot of times you look at a professor, or you also look at parents of friends, which are also a good opportunity, because your friends' parents know you as well. And that's always a great opportunity, because again, when you look for mentors, someone might be a mentor for a certain period in your life. And that's important to realize, that sometimes if the relationship reaches maturity, it's okay to move on, but always recognize and be understanding it's a two-way street. And mentors get from you as much as you get from them. So always look to see how you can reciprocate, because there's always learning that goes both ways. But really take the opportunity, because I think listening and really, making sure that you edify and value that mentorship will really allow you to go on and gain additional mentors, because many times people hop from person looking to get a different answer. And if you've heard a mentor, either a parent's friend or a professor, if they're giving you similar advice, it might not be exactly what you want to hear, but it might be necessary. And that could probably prevent you from having a lot of pain in the future, if you really take to heart some of the lessons that they are sharing with you to help you so you can reach your aspirations.
I think part of what everybody's saying here that I really value is relationships. Some of us have had a relationship for 30 years, others 20 years. And that what I like is it's just staying in touch with each other and then sharing things that are happening in your world. What do you think that students can do to build tighter relationships with their mentors so that it doesn't feel like a one-off? I think most mentors want to help with resumes or give tips on what to do in an interview, but I find that a good mentor is somebody who understands you. And you've talked about listening, but what else is there in a mentor relationship? And Javier, I'm curious, why don't you go start with that? Or actually, why don't we start Ashley on this one? Ashley, what do you think on that?
I think that one thing that you really need to know is actually, again, with Charles, it wasn't a matter that he helped me with my resume. It was a matter of navigating my career in many ways, because I think when you're younger in your career, you don't really know where you want to go. You have an idea of it. And I think really great mentorship is sometimes being able to observe and to take in what they are saying to you. One of the greatest things that Charles had said to me, I call him Chuck. People now call him, he's grown up, so he goes by Charles now. I still call him Chuck. Was he taught me that when you start having your own staff, that you want to hire people that you want to have a beer with, but you shouldn't necessarily have a beer with them. And the reason why was because he said, look, especially in our careers as we are starting to grow, you see sometimes your colleagues more than you see your family. And so you want to surround yourselves with people that you want to respect, not necessarily that you have to like them, but that you want to respect them and respect their ideals, that you actually want to be able to network with them, as in terms of having discussions that make you see things in a different kind of perspective. And so I've always kept that as part of my guide in my career, of hire people and surround myself with people that I would want to have a beer with, but not necessarily, just because we do work really long hours. We travel a lot. Most of my career, I've always traveled so much. And so it does make it easier to know the type of people that you want to work with, because I think it really helps also to give you perspective of where you're going.
That makes sense. Javier?
When you go into like a mentorship relationship, you really need to know what you want out of it, because sometimes it could be awkward. For example, my company assigned me a mentor, and she's a very high level executive with the company, and we got together, and there was a lot of pauses, and part of the challenge is that it has to be like a give and take relationship. I was meeting with an executive vice president, and the executive vice president pretty much told me, well, what do you want out of this relationship? And I was completely just like thrown back. It's like, I have no idea what I want for this relationship. And so, it was a lesson learned. I think from a mentee perspective, I need to know exactly what I would want from a mentor relationship. But I think as a mentor, I think she could have taken it in a different approach, as opposed to just putting the burden on me to really think about how I can benefit from that relationship. So definitely do some homework before, either as a mentor or as a mentee. You have to do your homework before you have that relationship.
Makes sense. Linda, you've been at Southwest for a long time. I'm curious, like, you've probably mentored a lot of junior folks at Southwest. What's it like on the flip side here, from a mentor perspective? What is it that you kind of feel have been some of your favorite moments, that the impact that you've had as a mentor?
Well, I love seeing when a light bulb goes on for someone, if they've been struggling with something and we've been talking through it, and then suddenly they solve the problem. That I get jazzed by that. So I love problem solving, and I love kind of working with someone to help them find their way through that. For those, and so that could be, they get great kudos for a major initiative that has gone really, really well. They get promoted. They get public, they get accolades, they get recognition for work really well done. That makes me so happy. Outside the organization, what I love about being a mentor to somebody, first of all, I get to learn about a completely different industry that I might know nothing about. So it's part of my ongoing education. And then secondly, it just helps me, this is going to sound weird, but it helps me keep my coaching skills sharp to take back into my organization when I'm talking to someone outside of Southwest Airlines, even because they could be at a different point in their career. It's a little bit more removed, right? So I'm not worried. I'm not necessarily mentoring someone who's trying to grow their career within Southwest Airlines, where I know everything about the network and how it works. But it's a little bit of a step removed, helping someone who is trying to navigate their own industry or their own organization that I may not know a lot about. And so it's just a different kind of, different kind of conversation, and I get energy from that. So I enjoy doing it.
Very cool. Charlene, how about you? I mean, you're in an interesting position that you understand the marketing and PR side of this, but you're actually on the HR side. So you're probably in the center of a lot of mentorships and helping your team members establish some mentorships too, I've got to assume.
Yeah, like Linda, I always think it's great when you see people succeed and reach their goals, and to be able to be really in the HR space and look at talent and really watch people develop through assessments, through interest, through interviews, through job rotations. You get to watch people, come in, very early in their career as they mature. And I like to keep tabs on folks that when I first started UPS and who I've encouraged and I've watched them move, and I get a email or I get a note say, hey, at the time I was a little bit shy, or it wasn't the right time for me to put my hand up to get promoted, but hey, you know what, I stuck with it. And I just wanted to let you know that I did get promoted. And I've gotten 4 emails in the past 2 years that I had some folks that were late bloomers, it was just not the right time. But I always encouraged them whenever I was traveling in the building or in their geography, I would reach out with them with a text, or I'd see them at a meeting and say, hey, look, I'm still looking for you to make that move. And it was just the nudge of encouragement to let them know that they could do it, and that they had the skill set, and that they were still, that they still were, capable of achieving what they had set out to do, even if it was later than when they initially had planned. So I think in the talent space, people achieve differently and people have different career trajectories, but the great thing is to make sure that as a mentor is, keep track of who you mentored, and always try to, whenever I see somebody get promoted, I always send them a note. I always, tell them congratulations, even on new rotational assignments, because it's really important for this long lasting building of someone's, just their confidence, as well as to be encouraging as a mentor.
Yes. Anybody else want to take that on too? Ashley, I see.
Actually, I was going to agree with Charlene, 100% agree with her. One of the items I've learned through my career is that you have to be able to give accolades to the people that you're helping to come up, because just saying that's great or congratulations goes such a long way that you don't realize how that impacts people. And so I would say for anybody who is mentoring or is looking to be mentored, is that part of it is those goals also of what Javier was talking about, understanding what your goals are. And then if you're feeling like that you're getting these kudos, that's part of you achieving where you're going in your career.
That makes sense. One of the questions we received, I'll kind of make it, it's a one question, but I'm going to add something to it. There's first generation students or first in their families to go to college, or those that are also what I'll say very shy. I'm really scared to even reach out. And I know we kind of touched on it a little bit, but is there advice and counsel how you would help somebody do something like this and find a mentor? Because sometimes I know for me, I've had a lot of mentors in my life, but I think of them after the fact. I didn't necessarily go to them to be a mentor, but on the flip side is, in today's environment, I think people need to actually go find a mentor and get some of that guidance. So I'm kind of curious, for first generation and those who are really shy, what advice would you offer? Anybody want to take a lead on that? Javier, I see you're jumping in here.
As a first generation Mexican American, my parents are, from El Rancho, which means from the ranch, in English, you're probably from the countryside. And I mean, the culture and the expectations in terms of how you interact with people is just so different. We are on the shy side in terms of, meeting strangers. And so I would say that you need to kind of develop a level of comfort. You have to, it's almost like a learned experience. And I would recommend that you find somebody that, connects with those values and connects with that experience.
How do I find that, Javier? That it's like, can I go on? I might not be able to find that on LinkedIn or something. How do you suggest I find somebody like that?
Yeah, a lot of times it's through family network. We talked about family networks here, but sometimes I understand that that sometimes our family, especially being the first generation going to college, maybe you don't have that family network, but you can tap into friends and you can tap to local circles. And so it is a bit of a challenge, but I'm suggesting this is a way to start, but it shouldn't be the way to end. I mean, you should develop a level of comfort with, somebody, at least in the right after college, with somebody that has these values and connections with you. But eventually you need to branch out. You need to connect with people that don't have that similar experience with you, because you want to learn from them. You want to get a sense in terms of how their differences, how their unique experiences have shaped their life, and how they can shape yours.
Good advice. Ashley, I see you want to chime in?
I'm not first generation since I came from Jamaica, but I was raised in the States. And so I didn't have that network either. Similar in a way, Javier. What I would highly recommend, which is what I kind of did, was using your school to help in finding mentors, because there are people who reach out to their schools, their alma maters, whether it's high school or college, that you can actually reach out to. And usually there's some kind of program that will help you, or even going to a lot of, if there are particular companies that resonate with you, like if it's Apple or whatever companies, reach out to their programs. A lot of companies actually have programs that help with mentorship that they do through internship programs and reaching out through there. And a lot of Oracle does actually quite a bit in having programs that help kids who are looking to go into tech.
That makes sense. Linda?
I was just going to, I love it when people take initiative, and I realize that can be a little bit more intimidating, perhaps for somebody who's shy or is just trying to figure out. I would just say, just get started. Kind of jot down who your network might be, whether it's friends, parents of friends, professors, asking for an alumni list of your program at your college, to start making outreach and just ask. I mean, the worst that can happen is that you send an email of introduction asking if someone would be willing to talk to you, get to know you, and potentially be a mentor, is that they never respond. And then if that's the case, move on, right? Move on to the next one. You've lost about 5 minutes worth of time. I was talking to a group of communications folks at a Houston PRSA meeting, like a monthly luncheon. And afterward, a young lady, this is 10 years ago, walked up to me, was working for Dow Chemical in Houston, and asked, hey, would you be willing to get to know me to see if we could develop a mentor-mentee relationship? I loved the chutzpah, quite frankly. And I was like, absolutely. 10 years later, she's worked overseas in Abu Dhabi. She's worked in Midland, Michigan. She's now working for Chick-fil-A in Atlanta. And we've been through together a lot of cycles, right, of our careers. And it's still a lively, wonderful, mutually beneficial relationship, quite honestly. Sometimes I feel like the mentee. But it's been, these are the start, the kernel of a relationship that can last a really, really long time.
Excellent, excellent. I remember when we talked about Glenn Broom, that I let him know that I was looking for a job, and this is back in 1991 as well. And we had a recession at that time frame. It was a real estate recession. And so I had stayed in touch with them, and that my thought process was that there were so many San Diego State alumni that was out there, and he taught so many of them, that the odds were that there'd be somebody he could refer me to. And obviously, that worked for me in getting my job. I know we're getting close to time. So what I'm going to do is ask you all one last question. When you think about it for a second, I'll stall as I ask the question, is I've asked you a lot of questions. What mentorship advice that I haven't asked you up to this point that you think would be really important for the students to understand and help? And that could range from a tip that you got from one of your mentors to something you've done for a mentor to thank them for their advice and counsel, to any other real experiences that you had. And my one stalling technique is that I'm writing a book on mentorship right now, and I'll be talking with numerous executives like yourselves to incorporate in this book. And as I started thinking about this, I was thinking, who was one of my very first mentors? And it was a 7th grade English teacher. And the 7th grade English teacher called my parents and told them that I was the biggest underachiever she had ever taught. And I'm like, wait, I'm working hard. But it forced me to work harder. And as I started working on the book, I wondered, this is a woman 45 years ago. She's still alive. And I reached out to her, and she remembered me. And I told her this story, and I said, is that accurate? And she said, Yep, sounds like me. I think I would have said that. And then I said, I'm calling you today, not just to check in, but I want to know if you'd be proud of me because I've actually taken English and I have a career in journalism and PR. And I just wanted you to be proud of me. And she said, Scott, that's what I live my life for, is to get calls like this. This is what our goal is in school. So it really made her feel good. So any story that you want to share or last advice you'd like to share with the students? And Charlene, I'll start with you.
I think the best mentorship advice that I could give a college student is to make sure that, you check in with your mentor, even maybe after the relationship is over. And maybe you've got a new mentor, because it's always good for your mentor that you initially invested the time with to know that you valued that relationship. And I think that, letting the mentors know how much you appreciate them really will just accelerate and just enhance their ability to mentor you and potentially mentor others. But it'll also prepare you for the next mentor, because really, you'll have numerous mentors in your career, but really thanking and staying in touch with that will really let all the mentors that come into your career, in your lifespan, know how purposeful and intentional and authentic you were about really making sure that you provided thanks and appreciation for their mentoring you.
So thank you, Charlene. I really appreciate it. Thank you for joining us today. Ashley.
I would have to say, because I think of the mentorship a little bit differently, is know the limitations of your mentor. In some ways, mentors are usually people who are professional, who are super busy, and because they're still working on their career, and realize their limitations, that if they don't get back to you immediately, it doesn't mean that they don't care. It's just that they probably are in the middle of something, but they will eventually. So have some patience and understand that, because that to me is actually the longest that you can have for a mentor, is that building on that is to respect their space so that they respect yours, and you'll have a really fruitful relationship from that, because you've respected their time.
How about not being too aggressive? How often should I reach out to you?
I kind of see it more as if there is something that I just, sometimes I still will even text Chuck like a question, because he's on so many different boards. He has so many different perspectives. And so I will just send him a quick question like, hey, have you encountered this? How did you manage this? And he'll text me back. It could be immediate. It could be 5 days later. But it's not, I respect our space, and that's maybe why I've considered him a mentor for almost 30 years.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ashley. Thanks for joining us today. Javier.
Actually, I was thinking the same thing as Ashley was talking about, is like just knowing the space, because if you develop a relationship that allows for texting, for example, I think it's a great way to have ongoing communication, such as asking the questions or sharing an achievement or is something that has not gone so well. But not everybody will be comfortable in having a text relationship, so you kind of have to really gauge how or what type of mentorship or what the comfort level of that mentor is.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Appreciate your help today. Linda, we'll close up with you.
My advice would be, and it's a cousin to what Javier and Ashley said, is come to the mentoring relationship in an organized way. So when you have your touch points, let's say you're going to have a phone call, or you're going to have a Teams Zoom meeting, come with some things that you want to talk about. So I love it when a mentee says, hey, for our conversation tomorrow, these are the 2 things I want to cover. And it could be, resume review. It could be, hey, I'm thinking about how my references that I want to put down for, a certain role, or I'm having this challenge on the job, would love to get your advice. And so if you can be organized during those touch points, I think we both get more out of it.
Awesome. Thank you, Linda. Great counsel, good advice. And to wrap things up, I'll just share that, one of my other mentors was Dave Nuffer from Nuffer Smith Tucker. And this guy tore apart my resume. I refixed the resume and used that to get my job with Scott Allison. So for anybody who's interested, I am always glad to pass that forward and help people with your resumes and informational interviews. So feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn if you'd like to do so. I also encourage you to link in to our panelists to thank them or ask any additional questions. Thank you for having us today. And one other mentorship advice, Dr. Sweetser posted this earlier in the chat, but there's another mentor resource for you called Net Synergy. It was started by Matt Prince, who spoke at our first program from Taco Bell, that he saw a hole to help people find mentors. And within 2 days of posting, he secured more than 100 people who were willing to be mentors. There's a bunch of different job offers that are on that website, in addition now to probably about 200 potential mentors in many different fields. So I encourage you all to go to netsynergy.com to learn more. And with that, I'll turn the floor back over to Dr. Sweetser.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. What a fantastic panel. And yeah, I really appreciate the time that you took to spend with us today as we sort of unpack how to make the most of mentors and even how to approach them and to get our foot into the door. Special thanks, of course, to our moderator, Scott Pansky, who created this 3P career series with us at the Broom Center. Everybody had said that they're open to talk to you and to connect with you. And so use that link in the chat to download their bios and to connect with them on LinkedIn. Like any PR event, we want to know how we did. When you get a survey as this webinar closes out, please take a moment and fill out the survey to give us feedback. I also put a link for that in the chat just in case you want to get started on it right now. So the Broom Center is really here for you, right? We are here to invest in you just as much as Dr. Broom invested in Scott back in the day. We want to think of ways that we at the Broom Center can invest in you and can help you along in being your best PR professional. So if you can think of a way that we can serve you, well, then we're going to be all ears. Just let us know. We see how hard you're working, especially during a pandemic, and we are ready to invest. So let us know what we can do, because we know that an investment in you is really an investment in improving the PR industry. So hit us up. That's all we have today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.